Let's talk more about the terror attack in London. President Trump denounced the attack this morning on Twitter. He called the terrorists losers, sick, and demented. He also called for a larger and tougher travel ban for those who want to come to the U.S., adding that it needs to be, quote, more specific, but that would not be politically correct. And Trump's comments come after London officials reported that a homemade bomb exploded on a commuter train. This happened early this morning about 8 o'clock. Their time. Police have reportedly identified that suspect. They're not releasing, though, the name at this time. At least 29 people have reportedly gone to local hospitals with non-life-threatening injuries, thankfully. Local media reports that some, though, suffered facial burns while others were injured in a stampede that happened trying to get away from that incident. This is Britain's fifth terrorism incident just this year alone. Meanwhile, the North Korean nuclear threat is not going away. This one flew over Japan and into the Pacific Ocean. U.S. and South Korea officials say it was the country's longest range yet, and it's clear the isolated regime is sending a message of defiance. And for more on North Korea, we want to welcome in our next guest. Joining us now, we have trial attorney Robert O'Brien. He is also the former foreign policy advisor to Scott Walker, Ted Cruz, and Mitt Romney's presidential campaign. He is also the author of While America Slept, Restoring American Leadership to a World in Crisis. So good to have you with us today.
Great to be here, Miranda. Thank you.
So before we get into North Korea, I want to talk about that suspected terrorist attack that happened in London this morning. There's concern that because this is considered to be a foiled attack, if you will, it was supposed to be much bigger, at least that's what authorities are saying, that another attack or attacks could soon follow. How concerned are you?
Well, I'm concerned because this fits the typical Al-Qaeda pattern where there's one attack and then oftentimes when the first responders get there or when security is focused on the first attack, a second attack takes place. Now, there's no one better at dealing with counterterrorism than the Brits. They're very good. They're highly trained. Scotland Yard, their SAS forces, their counterterrorism forces at MI6 and MI5 are very strong. So I expect that the Brits are trying to exploit whatever intelligence they can gather from the bombing site now. They're trying to round up suspects and prevent the second attack that you're talking about, Miranda.
Now, the Met Police have criticized the president for his tweets about the incident in London, saying that they're based on speculation, and they say that all speculation is unhelpful. Should the president had sent out those tweets?
But the president was expressing solidarity with our closest ally, the United Kingdom, in this difficult time. Look, our hearts go out to the victims of this attack, and while none of them are life-threatening, we hope there won't be any loss of life. I read one report that a woman was burned from head to toe. So this was a dastardly attack. The president was right to call these people losers. We've got to fight them. We've got to be relentless. We've got to be tough. And the president, if he was speculating that MI5 or MI6 or Scotland Yard or the Metropolitan Police were trying to track down the suspects and secure London, that's pretty standard fare. So I think any criticism of the president's tweets were, this morning, I think that's unfair criticism.
Now let's shift gears, talk a little bit about North Korea. It seems like these missile tests are increasing week by week, with this latest one being described as, quote, significant because of its distance. How concerned are you, Robert, that these tests and war of words between Kim Jong-un and President Trump will lead to an all-out actual war, not just a war of words?
Look, I'm very concerned, Miranda. This latest ballistic missile test is significant because the missile reportedly flew 2,300 miles. So that puts certainly Guam within range, the American territory in the South Pacific in range. It certainly puts Japan in range. The missile overflew Japan. Certainly South Korea, where we have a number of U.S. forces based. Traditionally, we've been less concerned about the nuclear weapons, or at least experts have been less concerned about them in North Korea's possession because they didn't have a delivery mechanism. They couldn't fly a long-range bomber or put them on a missile to deliver them to, attack the United States, our territories, whether it's Hawaii or Alaska or California, where I'm sitting today, or our allies. But it looks like Kim Jong-un has made significant progress on the ballistic missile front, and that's a real danger for the United States. We've got to figure out how to stop it. We've got to do it soon.
Well, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul seems to have an idea. He told Newsmax TV that he has a provocative one for addressing the North Korean problem while also putting pressure on China.
North Korea gives up all of their nuclear weapons, dismantles them all, and goes basically dormant, if not, to a point where they cannot make them. But in exchange, we say we're going to invite 10,000 Chinese troops to be part of an international force at the DMZ to ensure that South Korea doesn't invade or that the U.S. doesn't invade.
Senator Paul says that he thinks his idea will work because China doesn't trust the U.S. Let me ask you, Robert, does China not trust the U.S., and does it have a right not to trust us? And how viable of an option is Paul's idea?
Listen, Senator Paul is trying to think outside the box, but the idea of some sort of deal like we did with North Korea in 1994, that President Clinton did, that we'd do something for them in return for them dismantling their nuclear program, that didn't work. It's the same sort of deal that we did with Iran. It's not working. And I'm not sure the South Koreans want to invite 10,000 Chinese soldiers down onto their border purportedly to stop the North Koreans. If the Chinese want to stop the North Koreans, they should cut off all fuel, all imports and exports to and from North Korea, put Rhodesia-style sanctions in place, just like South Africa did in 1974, 1976, that eventually brought Rhodesia to its knees. We've got to have very, very, very strict sanctions. If the Chinese want to help, that's the way to do it. Bringing Chinese troops to South Korea, I don't think is a wise option at this point. I also don't think that the North Koreans are going to willingly give up their nuclear program in some sort of grand diplomatic gesture. It's just not going to happen. We've got to either strangle them economically with very severe sanctions, and I congratulate President Trump and Ambassador Haley for moving that process forward at the UN, but more needs to be done. Or we're going to have to, unfortunately, employ a military option like the Israelis did against Assad or against Hussein in Syria and Iraq, respectively, to end their nuclear programs.
Well, China, everybody keeps saying China's the key, but China is North Korea's largest trading partner. And now China's foreign ministry spokesperson says that China is not at the core of the North Korea problem, but didn't say what exactly is. Do you agree?
I don't agree. Look, the Chinese are the closest ally of North Korea. North Korea is actually China's closest ally in Asia. The countries are totally intertwined economically, and if the Chinese want to put an end to this, they can. For many, many years, they've allowed North Korea to be a distraction for the West so that they could engage in their military and economic rise while our eyes are focused on North Korea. It's like having a pit bull on a chain, but the pit bull's now rabid. And the Chinese, if they want to avoid some sort of military option to eliminate the nuclear program, the Chinese need to get involved. They need to do it now, and they're going to have to take tough measures against the North Koreans, something that they've been reticent to do to date.
But so far, nothing's worked, and people, even the president, have threatened sanctions against China. But everybody says you do that, and you would collapse the United States economy. So what do you do to put pressure on China to get China to comply?
Well, I think that there are a number of things we can do to put pressure on China. Number one, we can get serious about the trade imbalance, and they do need to be concerned that if we cut off Chinese banks or take trade action against them, China needs the United States more than we need China. If they're not selling their fishing rods in Walmart, there's a lot of Chinese that are going to be unemployed, out of work, and that's a serious threat to the Chinese Communist Party. They understand that, and we need to apply some real pressure there. The other thing we need to do is get very serious about missile defense. We moved some more THAAD batteries into South Korea, but we need to get serious about missile defense in Japan, in South Korea, throughout the region. That will affect the Chinese. The last thing they want is a Reagan-style SDI, a Strategic Defense Initiative, ringing Asia, because that puts them at some risk and will cause them to spend more and more money on their defense. So we need to get serious with the Chinese. We need to sanction Chinese banks that are doing business with North Korea, and we need to let them know we need business. Part of that is rebuilding the American military, rebuilding our Navy, getting more ships out into the Pacific, and showing a level of seriousness that we did not see during the Obama years that President Trump is talking about and trying to get through. But he's going to need support from Congress, for those additional expenditures, and we're going to need support from our allies to get on board with even more serious missile defense. But at the same time, Kim Jong-un is moving so quickly with his ICBM program and with his nuclear program that the military option, unfortunately, for all of its downsides, has to stay on the table for us to remain credible.
Robert, in the 30 seconds that we have remaining, I just want to ask you real quickly, because the UN Security Council is planning to convene today again at 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Time in New York. What do you think will be discussed at that Security Council? What will be the #1 priority, do you think?
Well, I think the #1 priority is going to be trying to do something to stem the tide of money that's going into North Korea that allows them to continue to develop their ballistic missile program and their nuclear program. And so I think you're going to see additional sanctions on the table. And we'll see if the Chinese want to take a leadership, a constructive approach and join the rest of the world in cutting off the North Koreans and bringing this to a halt, or if they're going to defend their ally. And I'm hoping that they're going to take the responsible approach and help us shut down what's going on in North Korea. It's critical.
Let's hope so. Robert O'Brien, thanks so much for your time today. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me on. Take care.